It's time to accelerate. Hey friends, this is Andy. Welcome to episode 626 of Accelerate, the sales podcast of record, and another episode of Frontline Friday with my very special guest and co-host, Bridget Gleason. In today's episode, we're going to talk about character and values and the importance and connection of those traits to sales success. And we're going to get into what good character means for sales and how that plays into the buyer's perception of salespeople and their ability to build trust-based relationship and their willingness to do business with a vendor. A lot of it boils down to character. So if you'd like to see the show notes for this episode, go to andypaul.com/626. And as I've been mentioning this week, if you're a top performer in your current sales role, and you're looking for a fresh challenge to take your career to the next level, then CenturyLink should be at the top of your list. I mean, I've been mentoring sales and professionals for years, and I found that one of the most important elements to career success is aligning yourself with a company that develops its employees, values their customers, and has a portfolio of products that can compete with anyone in the world. So with its recent acquisition of Level 3, the new CenturyLink is a world leader in providing cloud, security, real-time communications, hybrid IT, and managed services. So if you want the excitement, challenge, and rewards that come from selling industry-leading solutions to the enterprise, then visit CenturyLink.com/accelerate and join their talent community. Once you join, a member of their team will reach out, connect, and see if a career at CenturyLink is the right next step for you. All right, let's fire up Frontline Friday. Bridget, how you doing?
Andy.
Yeah?
Fantastic. Excellent. Great.
That is fantastic. And you've weathered the literal storm in Boston. You've come out on the other side.
Yeah. And you know what? When it's, 40 degrees, I feel like it's summer. Like I'm so like, oh my God, this is great. I've taken to the East Coast. I've embraced it.
Yeah, when I was a kid in Wisconsin, I mean, when it got to 40, like in January, sometimes you get this odd day, it would pop up to 40. That was like t-shirt weather.
Oh, I know. Yeah. And I think it's getting, going to get warm. Like, yeah. Wow, it's going to get to the 50s, 57.
In January, look at that.
And then it's going to drop a bit, but that's okay.
Yeah, it could be good weather for those people who are going to be watching the Patriots.
That's right. That's right.
At their first playoff game. We're recording a couple weeks ahead of time. So we don't know the results, what's going to happen.
Yes, we don't know.
So we don't know. We don't know whether that blow up written about between the owner and Belichick and Brady, whether that's fake news or real news. Yeah. I'm sure it dominated the airwaves in New England this week.
Definitely. Gosh, Boston. I was going to say it's we.
It's we.
We take our team seriously.
So what you're saying is you've shifted your alliances from the Niners to the Patriots?
Well, no, okay. I haven't said that, but I've got dual alliance. Like I'm able to love, it's like I love two kids. I love them both.
Okay. One's not your favorite?
No, I definitely don't have a favorite.
Okay.
Definitely don't have a favorite.
All right. So we're going to.
All right.
We're going to talk about an article I published for my subscribers to my newsletter, which you haven't subscribed to. Newsletter, I know you have, but others that are listening you get some great content every week. And actually, we're going to start doing it a little more frequently than weekly. But I reflect on what I learned of recording 600 episodes of this show. And a lot of times people have asked me what I've learned. And so I thought, okay, I've had 600 in-depth conversations, more than 600 in-depth conversations with some of the sharpest minds in sales and marketing and management and leadership. So I thought I'd summarize some of what I've learned.
Great.
Okay. So first one that I talked about was that
I read these, so I kind of cheated, but go ahead.
Yeah, well, I know you've read. Good. So is that selling has changed less than people want to believe, meaning that despite all the buzzwords and technology flooding into sales, that it really hasn't changed that much. I mean, effective business-to-business selling is still primarily about what happens in those person-to-person moments when the seller has to communicate and deliver value to the buyer. And those can't be outsourced to technology today. I mean, maybe at some point, but not yet today. So I think that as long as people continue to, and I think my guests have been unanimous in believing this too, is as long as sellers can maintain that focus on developing their skills and their craft and the fundamental principles of selling, that regardless how the technology changes and customer buying behaviors change, you're still going to be in a good position.
Is that a question?
No, that was.
I agree.
That was a statement.
Yes, 100% agree.
Okay, perfect. So I think the next one, though, maybe we discuss more.
Let's disagree. Okay.
Well, I don't know if we disagree.
Let's find some we can disagree on. Okay.
Okay. So the next one is that one of my conclusions after 600 episodes and interviews and conversations with people is that technology is going to have a massive impact on sales and sales outcomes, but it's not having that impact yet. So, despite sort of this massive infusion of technology into sales, I've not seen data that is rigorously collected data that exists to prove that the technology is contributing to either higher levels of sales per individual or elevated levels of sales productivity. So even though there have been entire business models sort of created around this assumption that, that this is happening, that productivity is improving and performance is improving due to the technology, I don't think it's evident that's the case. And it will be. It's not yet, but it will be. And I in the article, I reference one of my favorite sayings from Roy Amara, who is a futurist, and unfortunately passed away a number of years ago. But he's famous for his formulation called Amara's Law, which is, quote, "We tend to overestimate the effect of a technology in the short run and underestimate the effect in the long run." And I believe that's what's happening with sales. I think, there's a lot of huge potential with the tools and technologies that are coming into it. We just really don't know how to use them yet, or maybe this generation isn't quite the generation. The next set of features coming and so on will really help us, not just, help us help the customer do a better job of making decisions too.
Yeah, I fundamentally agree with it. I guess the only thing that I would add is I think that in some cases, we'd be worse off without the technology. I think we would go backwards. So I sort of feel like we're just treading water. Yeah. Because I think the environment has changed. I think it's just how far down the funnel a buyer can go without having to interact with a salesperson. I think there are just I think there are technologies around sales that have emerged, and I think that's made it difficult. Then, like, we're almost having to use technology to almost fight technology, and I don't think we figured out the best way to integrate them all. But I think without technology, I think we'd be further behind.
Possibly. Yeah, I think I can buy into some of that. But I don't think it's helping the way people think it is either. And it certainly is not as one of the problems is that certainly through the people I've spoken to on the show, I mean a good chunk of those people have sort of a vested interest in monetizing and selling these tools and technologies. And there's a lot of groupthink that goes into it.
That's true with anything, right. With just anything.
That this must be helping. And to your point, I think in certain segments that we sell into, you absolutely need the technology and use it in order not to go backwards, as you talked about. But it hasn't changed the ultimate outcomes for us in terms of becoming more productive. That each salesperson during an 8-hour period is going to be able to produce 20% more revenue. Now, I think that day is coming. I mean, and I don't think I don't think it's going to be a function purely of getting rid of 20% of the salespeople. Therefore, the remaining 80% of salespeople all raise their productivity 20%. I mean, there's going to be some of that, but at some point, I think somebody's going to figure out the equation that says, look, we look at all, I'll say I don't say all categorically, but almost all of the tools that are being sales tools that have been released in the last 2, 3, 5 years, they're all sales centric. And there are very few that say, yeah, how can I solve the buyer's problem as well? Which is the buyer wants to quickly gather information to make a good decision with the least investment of time and effort that they can. And to me that's a chasm that still has to be bridged. And if the technology can do that, then I think, wow, then the productivity just starts skyrocketing.
And you don't think the technologies are also designed to improve that salesperson, prospect, or customer experience?
Well, there are some. I didn't want to say all, but there are some. Okay. I mean, there are some tools. I've seen some sales enablement tools like Showpad, that I think is designed with the idea of improving the buyer experience. And so there are some that are out there.
Yeah.
But by and large, the vast, vast majority, it's all about us and our sales process and so on. And so I said, I think that's a chasm that's still to be bridged. And I think smarter people than me have to figure out how they're going to bridge that. And when they do, then I think we really start seeing a huge, huge impact from the investment in technology.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I hope so. I hope we do. I don't know that we will.
Interesting.
I don't know that that's going to make, I think we're just trying to keep up. And maybe it goes back to your earlier point that I think what's really going to be the differentiator is it's just the raw sales skills that somebody has and some of the intuition and empathy and listening and really trying to understand. So maybe technology will help with that, but I think we're just going to keep just more barriers come up to connect. It's easy. I very rarely, almost never answer my phone if it's somebody I don't know. So, and responding to email, it's very difficult to get through to me. And so, I don't know, I guess there are more barriers and a lot of technology is trying to break those down or get around them.
Yeah. Well, I think we don't know. I think that's why I'm optimistic, is because 10 years ago, 5 years ago, even, before even some of these more recent sales development platforms and other tools started coming out, I think it's not just a matter of the technology. I think it's also the technology is going to show us a different way to use them. And I think, to your point, it's hard to get hold of people. It's always been hard to get people on the phone, and now it's getting hard to get hold of people via email. And yet, those are the tools that most sellers rely on. So it seems like there's a solution in there somewhere that's going to evolve. And I don't know what that is, but I'm pretty confident. Unless I think Amara's law is right on, is that it's going to get us there. It's just not sure what iteration.
Just the timing.
Yeah. You'll probably be retired and sipping Mai Tais on the beach.
Oh, wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah.
I like that. I like that prediction. Let's talk more about that prediction.
Well, I can predict that I'm going to be having Mai Tais on the beach next week, but that's not early.
One of the lucky ones. You're one of the lucky ones.
Yeah. True. That's true. Extremely grateful that I'll be having Mai Tais on the beach next week.
That'll be great.
There's nothing wrong with that. Everybody should try it. So the next thing then, so we talked about impact of technology, is this whole idea of the science of selling. So there's I think we're not paying enough attention to the science of selling in sort of two dimensions. And I think there are sort of two dimensions about the science of selling that get discussed. One is the science of selling as touted by what I call the data or analytics camp. And they've 3-4 years ago, seeing articles, proclaiming the death of the art of selling because it's all about the data. The data will tell you exactly what to do, when to do it, blah, blah, blah. And, that, in my mind, that's plain silly, right? Because we know the math behind what many people call the science of selling. The math has been around for forever. I mean, sales is a numbers game. I think I think our limitation really when it comes to data, the real science in there, is that we don't really know how to use that data. We are generating more data, but I think our ability to produce the data outstrips our ability or the ability of sales leaders to rationally use that data to make better decisions.
Here. I think it's hard. There's no shortage of data, but analyzing the data, I think that's always been an issue. And I think in some ways now it is more complicated because we've got the ability to collect just about everything. And so you get a lot of stuff that gets thrown in there. And how do you analyze it? How do you, what factors really correlate? What just happens, aren't correlated, but maybe they're more, I don't want to say coincidental, but maybe they're connected in some way.
Well, yeah.
Not causal. And so I think the analysis is hard. You've got more data points that you're also dealing with.
Yeah, and data is really tricky. And that's the thing is we, there are people, data scientists, and they're there for a reason because it's a complicated business.
Yeah.
And especially when we're humans, we're dealing with our own confirmation biases and all the other cognitive biases that interfere with our ability to rationally look at the data. Because, we see correlations that all the time in all this data that are spurious at best.
That's a good word.
Yeah, but they're there. I mean, and data scientists and math statisticians.
Okay, you're struggling with that one, but
statisticians. You'd have thought
Good.
I'd had my Mai Tai already.
I know. I was going to say, really?
Yeah.
Is it next week?
Yeah, it must be the cold weather here affecting me. But they see that. I mean, there's examples of reading this book on data and how we misuse data, and there's a correlation. I tried to see if I get this right. I think it's like between the number of days of sunshine in America, Samoa, and the number of lawyers in California. It was something like that. I was like, there's a correlation, statistical correlation. That's like, yeah, but does that really mean anything, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, anyway, so I think we're just on the cutting edge, not the cutting edge. We're at the beginning, the leading edge, let's say, of data in sales. And like everything, certain aspects of it have been overhyped. We need to pay attention to it. We need to get better at using it. We need to understand and train people how to use data. I mean, I'm not an expert at it. I mean, I pay attention. I've read about it. I know some things I need to look out for when analyzing data. I've become much more proficient over the last 5 years or so, but I'm not an expert, right? And so we need to train people how to actually use data. So that's one. And then another thing on the science of selling, obviously, is about the whole revolution in social psychology that has occurred over the past 50 years. Daniel Kahneman, Thaler, all these names, Simon, and so on, that research this, talk about how we, how our brains work, how we make decisions, how we're influenced, or how we influence people in turn. And I don't think that gets enough attention. I mean, there was an excellent book that came out last year, actually 2016, called The Science of Selling. David Hoffeld wrote it. He was on the show. A lot of information in there, and you don't have to believe that all of it is true, but there's enough in there that is really important. That I think if you're in sales and your business is building relationships with other people in order to, inspire and influence them to make a decision about your product, I think every hour you can spend learning more about how people's minds actually work, that's a huge investment, an important investment.
It's really, people buy from people. I agree with you. It's critically important. It can't be overlooked. Shouldn't be overlooked. It can be.
And it is.
And it is. It probably shouldn't be overlooked.
Well, and the thing is that when we talk about influence, and this is the thing that's so tricky, when we talk about influences, people tend to associate that as sort of a negative, right? We're influencing people. And And
they sometimes like to say manipulate.
Manipulate, right. But the fact is, we are influencing them. If we come from a position of service and wanting to help customers, there's nothing wrong with influence. You're not doing it in a negative sense. You're not tricking them into buying something they didn't want. I mean, there are people obviously try that, but hopefully people in our audience, that's not their game. They understand they're there to help somebody, and you are trying to influence them to make the right decision.
Yeah, and I think that distinction between influence and manipulate often has a very negative connotation. You're trying to get someone to do something often against their will or their better judgment. And I think in influence, hopefully the reps with integrity, and I think those are the ones that are going to survive because trust is so important. Mm-hmm. You do want to influence, but influence, as you say, for on behalf of the customer.
Right.
You want to share with them something that you know that is powerful and important, you think could be helpful to them.
Exactly. Okay, so the next issue was that, at the beginning of my show, I over the last 250, 300 episodes, I've led with the same question, which is, what's sort of the biggest challenge facing sales reps today? And the number one answer is that salespeople are overwhelmed. And so from all these conversations I've had, or 600 plus, my concern is that we're overcomplicating sales and overwhelming our salespeople. And I'm not sure, or we're not sure collectively what, we know this, we got high in certain fields, higher turnover than we've had in the past in certain sales jobs. But it's this is a problem. And if we're going to build this profession and then get people inspired to invest time and effort in their careers into sales, we have to address this issue somehow.
How do you think about that? How do you think about addressing that?
Well, one is I think that what, again, based on the conversations having is many sales leaders, and these people interviewing obviously are founders, business owners, so on, is that part of it is this rush to adopt technology in certain sectors, creates this immense learning curve, burden, if you will, on sales teams to learn the tools, learn the processes, being judged in very minute terms in terms of their activities, and that's a lot. It's tough. It's a tough environment, but somehow we have to rationalize that. I mean, sales has always been tough, right? I mean, it's tough when you got started, tough when I got started. We had many of the same pressures. One thing we didn't have is to learn as many tools to be able to reach our customers and so on. But it's interesting. It's just sort of the most common answer. Probably, I would say,
is being overwhelmed.
Overwhelmed, probably 50%. Now, do you see that with your team?
Oh, yeah, I do. I think some of it, is a function of people not having also good time management skills, and they're not skillful at prioritizing. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I think that plays a part that we haven't equipped them. I think there's some of it that can be handled with helping to prioritize. But I do think there are a lot of demands put on a salesperson. I don't know that they're more than they were before, maybe because there's more technologies that they need to master and understand. But we're also primarily dealing with people, at least I am, they're digital natives. So I think for me, the Luddite, it's a bit more challenging. But I think for most of them, I don't think the technology is necessarily what they struggle with.
Well, I think the technology can be distracting. I mean, digital natives notwithstanding. I think that we're seeing, even in the last couple of weeks, this more and more voices being raised about concerns concerns associated with the broad use of technology and how addictive and distracting it's become.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's not a leap to say, sure, we've got digital natives. They should be learning. They probably learn these tools more quickly. But by the same token, potentially, and I'm not sure that's the case, but potentially also more distracted by it too.
Well, I think, yeah, just more distracted in general, that people still have this belief that you can multitask, which you can't.
No. That'd be one of the great things to teach teach kids early in their educational careers is
Focus.
Focus.
Yeah. I agree.
It's not in the curriculums anywhere, but it's something that doesn't really manifest itself. Well, I'm sure it does more these days. And if you're a AP student in high school and taking all these AP classes and you're trying to do sports and you're trying to do college applications and community service, then yeah, you probably get a good sense of it even now. But all right, so last one we'll touch on is that's certainly been a consensus among my guests, and it's certainly my belief as well, is that our sales leaders and salespeople are not investing enough in their own development. And it'd be great if, as corporate leaders, we were always able to set aside time every day to be able to invest in our people's development. But, it doesn't happen. It's probably unrealistic to assume that companies will see the light on that. And so we sort of push it onto people in their own time to get better and to learn. And yeah, it's just, again, the consensus among guests is it's just not happening.
I would say that's true also. Not universally, though. There are, like, I just think about my team. There are certain people on the team who are much more aggressive about their own learning. And they'll listen to podcasts and they'll read books and they'll go to meetups. I mean, they're very aggressive about it. And there are others that I can make suggestions and recommendations, and we've got, onboarding and that, and they'll do that. They'll do the onboarding. They may pick up a couple of recommendations, typically not. It's got to be really short. So they're not as invested. So I think it's mixed. And I guess it's just what the expectation is. I'm very curious by nature. I love learning. I love new things. So I don't know that I'm a good barometer of what should be expected. But I see a bit of a mix, but more for sure that sit back, or that kind of sit back and wait as opposed to really dive in.
Yeah, I think I think this is one of the important issues, and I'm not sure there's what the solution is, but I think that this is one that if we really want to look at elevating productivity across an industry, across the profession, if you will, let's say B2B sales, people just have to get smarter, and it takes an investment of time. And again, it's not time that's necessarily going to be in your workday. And so, people, I guess, have to perceive themselves as being a little more entrepreneurial. And by being more entrepreneurial, saying, look, if I'm an entrepreneur, I can't rely on anybody else to, do certain things.
Absolutely. Right.
I have to be myself. And I think, to me, that's a mindset that certainly I'm going to talk more about in the coming years. Is, how do we get sellers to be more entrepreneurial? And I'm certainly not the first one to talk about it, but I think that I remember back in my early days is, a manager saying to me is, hey, the great thing about being in sales, you're CEO of your own business.
I remember that early on too.
Sure. And that was one of the attraction.
Yeah, that was one of the very, very much one of the attractions.
Right. So I don't hear it talked enough about. I've read a book recently which stressed that, which I was like, yay, glad to see somebody else really talking about that. But I think it's a mindset for people listening is to think about this. This is your business. You've got territory. You've got a set of accounts.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Own it.
And,
own it.
Know that by owning it, that maybe you even learn, where your deficiencies are in terms of owning it, how you could optimize the business you're developing from your business that you own, your territory you own. and be inspired to, pick up a book, listen to a podcast. Because at this point, I think if rather than set yourself a goal of, I'm going to read a book a week or even a book a month, if you could read 3-4 books a year on sales, you're ahead of 95% of the people out there.
Oh, yeah. And there's so much to learn. There's so much to learn, always. And for me, it's endlessly fascinating, but, that's me.
Yeah. Well, you're curious. I'm curious. I mean, I again, was reading this book I just talked about, and I was laughing when I was going back through it today. It's because it's like, oh, I've highlighted about 50% of the book for things that I thought were really interesting and different perspectives or a different way of saying something that it's like, hey, this is what we want in sales, right? This is how we get better. It's we may think we know something, but maybe somebody comes along and has just a different way of expressing it or looking at that particular challenge or problem that opens your eyes in a way they never were before.
Yeah. And I think that's, really interesting. Sometimes just the way somebody phrases it or the story they tell, even things that I've known, just to have them presented in a new way gives me additional insight.
Absolutely. So, all right. Well, unfortunately, we need to cut short, but we'll come back and do this after the next 600.
All right. Whenever that is.
May I live so long.
May you live so long. Sounds like an Irish blessing.
Yeah, right. So, all right, Bridget, Captain Fantastic. Oh, as always, been fantastic. Friends, thank you for joining us. And we look forward to talking to you next week.
Sounds great. Have a great one.